The Years of Disillusionment. During the second and third years of his marriage, Muhammad Ali Jinnah made three remarkable decisions. He resigned from the Imperial Legislative Council, the Home Rule League, and the Indian National Congress. For some time after this, he was overshadowed by other leaders, especially Gandhi. The graph of Jinnah's career showed a downward trend, but as his story unfolded, the three decisions were proved to be honorable, wise, and right. On July 8, 1918, the joint recommendations of the Secretary of State and the Viceroy were published as the Montagu-Chelmsford Report. Jinnah was cautiously favorable. In a statement to the press, he suggested vital changes, but he ended his criticisms by advising his countrymen to treat the report with due respect and serious consideration. He tried to influence other leaders towards this serious consideration, among them Dr. Annie Besant, who had said of the report that it was unworthy of England to offer and unworthy of India to accept. Mr. Kanji Dwarkadas has recorded his version of the meeting between Jinnah and Dr. Besant, who came down to Bombay to see him. Jinnah wanted her to tone down her criticism of the proposals, and he had a 2-hour tete-a-tete with her. As he came out of her room almost half dead at about 8 in the evening, he said, "My dear fellow, never argue with a woman." The next move was during the September session of the Legislative Council, when a committee of non-official members approved the suggested Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, with certain qualifications. In November, the war ended and a semblance of peace came to Europe, but not to Indian politics. Within a few weeks of the happy news of the armistice, the annual sessions of both Congress and the Muslim League met in Delhi. During 11 years, since the split at Surat in 1907, there had been no deep differences of policy within Congress, but in December 1918, the extremists, since described as nationalists, dominated the debates and wholly condemned the proposed Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. Jinnah had to look close at his political chessboard. For many years he had enjoyed the increasing support of the moderates in Congress in his idealistic policy of Hindu-Muslim unity. They had applauded all his peaceful intentions, but they were now outnumbered by the nationalists with their demand for immediate self-government. Jinnah was among the outnumbered. Gandhi, in prison or out, was to catch the eye and raise the fervor of the people with his gift for emotional leadership, which Jinnah lacked. Any sympathy for British policy that had been awakened in India by the Montagu-Chelmsford report was killed by two alarming events early in 1919. In January, the draft of a bill that was later passed as the Rowlatt Act came before the Legislative Council. The bill, the outcome of recommendations of a committee presided over by Mr. Justice Rowlatt, sought to curb seditious crime by giving the government power to detain and try insurgents and active enemies of its policy without a jury. Although these powers were safeguarded by elaborate protection against abuse, and although they were never enforced, thoughtful Indians became anxious as to the possible dangerous effects of such a new shackle on the freedom of the people. Jinnah shared this anxiety. He enumerated his objections on his fingers in the Legislative Council and said at the end, "It is my duty to tell you that if these measures are passed, you will create in this country from one end to the other a discontent and agitation the like of which you have not witnessed, and it will have, believe me, a most disastrous effect upon the good relations that have existed between the government and the people." In the third week of March, the repugnant Rowlatt Act became law, and on March 28, Jinnah wrote to the Viceroy, accusing the government of India of having ruthlessly trampled upon the principles for which Great Britain avowedly fought the war. He considered that the passing of the Act clearly demonstrated that the Imperial Legislative Council was a legislature but in name, a machine propelled by a foreign executive. As a protest, he tendered his resignation and ended his letter with the hope that this Black Act would be annulled. Gandhi's protest was less personal. He commanded a day of humility and prayer, and remembering the success of his policy in South Africa, he ordered a similar campaign of non-violent civil disobedience in India. But Gandhi did not sense the peril in releasing a thoughtful policy among millions of untutored, superstitious people. Also, he further bewildered them by announcing the beginning of his campaign for March 30th, and then changing it to April 6th. In many parts of India, the day of humility and prayer became one of riots and bloodlust. When Gandhi made a tour of the big cities, he succeeded only in awakening the passions he dreaded most. On April 7th, Gandhi was forbidden entry into the Punjab, and the police escorted him back to Bombay. On the 9th, in Amritsar, 2 Hindu leaders who had been making rebellious speeches were arrested for deportation. These 2 acts led to cruel rioting in the city. 3 European bank managers were murdered, their safes were looted, and a crowd of insurgents tried to fire the railway station. On the 11th, the British commander of the Julundur Brigade, Brigadier General R.E.H. Dyer, was ordered to quell the disturbances. Public meetings were declared unlawful, but on April 13th, several thousand Indians gathered within the Jallianwala Bagh, a walled area from which there were only 2 narrow ways of escape. Then followed an act of terrible folly. General Dyer ordered his troops to fire on the defenseless throng. Almost 400 were killed and 1,200 wounded. Martial law was declared throughout the Punjab and enforced with humiliating ruthlessness. Then Gandhi realized the savage consequences of his civil disobedience movement, and he called off the campaign. But sullen resentment remained long after calm was restored to the Punjab, and the memory of Amritsar soured Indian politics for many years to come. Jinnah had no part in these terrible acts and decisions. He remained aloof, watching Gandhi use his dangerous talent for influencing the Hindus. He was their Mahatma, or great soul, and his power over them went deeper than politics, into subconscious instincts that were fused with their mysticism and their worship of many deities. But he also came to enjoy influence over the Muslims for a different reason. They were monotheists, and there were no religious implications in their regard for Gandhi's leadership. His appeal to them succeeded only when it was purely national and non-sectarian, or when he chose to espouse a cause of particular concern to the Muslims. In this matter, events served him well.